Jonny, welcome to Founders Tales. Do you want to give everyone a quick intro to yourself and to Firstglance, your business?
For sure. Thanks for having me, Chris. Really appreciate it. My name is Jonny Boyarsky. I'm a multi-time startup founder, VC connector, and fund advisor. Right now, I'm building Firstglance, which is a startup discovery platform that's really aimed at accounting for the way that people actually engage in this industry. A lot's been done before, but I think that a lot of people have made some fatal errors, which is why there's nothing ubiquitous yet. That, it's not like when people start a company, there's a dedicated platform that people are like, you need to go put your company here. And so we're trying to change that and make it easier for founders and investors alike.
Cool. So what was the problem initially that sparked the idea for the business?
Yeah, I'll kind of break that down into two different problem sets, which is first, there's a problem that many people have experienced on both the founder and investor side, which is for founders, where do I post updates about my company? People aren't reading investor update emails, and LinkedIn and X aren't really working as mediums for, documenting and storytelling for progress. And then secondly, investors are finding it really difficult to track companies. So that's kind of where the problems exist over here. Now, why hasn't that been solved? I think is a much longer and involved sort of problem description, but I think it's really related to human behavior, psychology, and sort of just accounting for the existing processes of the venture landscape.
Yep. Okay. Cool. And then in terms of your MVP, how does the platform look today versus the first version?
Yeah, it took a while. We had some CTO snafus that we sort of have now resolved. Got a great developer here who's really building this out. But MVP right now is we're mobile first. So we want to be the platform that, you meet somebody at a conference, just say, hey, follow me here on Firstglance. It's a QR code, it's a link, make it really easy. But people upload the information about their company. They can add a pitch deck, whatever they want. And it exists in a Firstglance card, which is just the one screen summary of what does your company do and how far along you are. So that's kind of where the MVP is at right now. We also have playlists that you can have for pitch competitions, for accelerators, for funds to describe their portcos or, current cohorts of accelerators. So got some other functionality too that people seem to like.
Cool. And so far, what's been the biggest moment that you've had to deal with, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, I think that there's always this moment that founders kind of go through where they're like, it's not ready, it's not ready, it's not ready. But I have a business opportunity that makes it so that even though it's not ready, I'm still going to try to force it, and make it work. And so recently we teamed up with DC Startup Week to use the platform to kind of track some of their best companies, and some of the onboarding we were still working on. And so I ended up making a bunch of the profiles on behalf of the founders and then passing it off to them. I was using some AI on the back end, so it made it a little bit easier. But it was one of those moments where I was like, I wish that we were just a little bit farther along product development wise, so that a few loose ends were tied up. But you don't go when you're ready. You go when the play starts. So.
Yep. Yeah. And what's a lesson that you've learned through building your businesses that you couldn't have learned through a textbook or a course maybe that you could have gone through?
Yeah, I think it's actually something that I've heard before, but until I lived it, I didn't really see it, which is I've worked on multiple startups in the past in various arenas. If you don't obsess over distribution and think about it night and day, like what your go-to-market strategy is and how it's going to work, I really think it's hard to be an investable startup. I see so many people just building stuff, and they start so much with the product and the problem and the solution. And as somebody that's met with close to, I don't know, probably 5,000 to 6,000 startups in the last 5 years, I've heard every idea. I'm so uninterested in ideas. I'm so interested in distribution. And I think a lot of VCs will say that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And then how did you convince your first investor or customer to believe in the vision that you've got for the business?
Yeah, it was a little bit of I'll answer both. So on the investor side, it was actually kind of inbound. I had met this guy on LinkedIn, and he had been talking a lot about startups and early stage investing, and had been a former exec at some pretty cool tech companies. And we were working on this sort of free consulting company called Literally Helping Startups that was just free advisory for founders as a precursor to Firstglance. And he called me like in the middle of the night on like a Tuesday and was like, there needs to be a platform. And I was like, way ahead of you, we're building it. And then he was like, all right, I'm interested further in cutting a check. So, we flew out to the West Coast and sat in a office for 3 days straight, just hashing out kind of what this platform would look like. And then he ended up cutting a check. As far as like the initial founder or investor, getting them on the platform, I've been building out a network of this for, the better part of the last decade. So it was much more of just texting friends being like, try this. But I did feel pretty good about kind of convincing these two guys down in DC to use the platform for DC Startup Week, just because I wasn't even really trying to pitch them on the idea, but I'd mentioned what I was doing. They're like, that's really interesting. Could you help us with some of this matching that we're working on? And they were like, yeah, let's give this a shot. And so I think that they had felt this problem many times over, as have many others. So the sort of connectors are the ones that I find resonate best with it.
Yeah. Okay. And maybe not with your current business, but reflecting, what's been the hardest role that you've looked to hire for within one of your startups, and what was the reason or reasons behind that?
Yeah, I think that it's always been technical for me. I feel like I've tried everything. I've tried multiple CTOs. I've tried dev shops overseas, dev shops, onshore, and I think that the hardest part about finding a good technical lead or a CTO is really an optimization problem. So I think that there are people who are like the best of the best and using AI and can build things faster than anybody, and they're extremely expensive, know what they're worth, and are they're being offered millions of dollars a year at large orgs. Then there's CTOs who sort of promise the moon and underdeliver, and they're often pretty cheap, but they're cheap for a reason. And so then it's like, okay, well, trying to find somebody who is all of these things, efficient, cheap. And then when you go overseas, I feel like oftentimes the problem is, do they understand what you're trying to build and like intuitively get it? And so I feel like I'm kind of fortunate that I finally found somebody who I thought was cost effective, very, efficient, and understood pretty intuitively what I'm trying to build.
Well done for finding that person.
Yeah.
Cool. And then for you personally, how do you spot startup DNA in candidates when you're speaking to them?
Yeah, I think that there's lots of characteristics that people sort of look for, and you want them to be smart, you want them to be sort of intuitive. But I think that one of the things that I increasingly become enamored with is self-awareness and polymaths. So like, does somebody start by trying to like make a mental model of what you know? I find that some founders just jump into things, and I've had founders that have like lectured me on fundraising, even though I've lived this so many times with other founders. I've had founders who are just lacking self-awareness and think that they've built the next social media site, and it's like, well, Jack Dorsey with billions of dollars and having run Twitter and for so many years, like, is struggling to get people onto Blue Sky, and like finally made a breakthrough when Elon kind of messed up, X in some ways. And so it's like, if you don't realize and have that sort of not only personal self-awareness, but business self-awareness of knowing what the actual hard parts are, I don't think you're that investable. And then I find that the people who are kind of the best builders are actually really multifaceted. So do they have an interest in, finance, psychology, politics, economics, philosophy, like, as well as, tech and what they're trying to solve. So those are some of the characteristics that I think kind of set founders apart.
Yeah, interesting. And obviously you're building in Boston. What advantages, flip side of the coin, frustrations do you see kind of building out in Boston versus San Francisco or maybe New York?
Yeah, totally fair. And I lived in New York for a little while, so I had some exposure to that ecosystem. I think that Boston has a lot of pros, but also some cons. I'll start with the pros. Boston has the best universities in the world. I really don't think that there's a city that can compare in terms of the number of elite institutions. And I even think too that like our tier 2 universities are often tier 1 universities in most other places. And so I think from an education standpoint, we're really hard to beat. Biotech and healthcare is also excellent. There are so many seed stage funds here, and they are very disciplined. So I think that for LPs looking to invest in managers, I think Boston's a great target because I think that they have fewer zeros, or better at riding highs and lows and not getting swept up into hype. The other problem though is that there aren't as many like super active angel and pre-seed funds, as well as Series A and Series B funds. So it's sort of that lack makes it so that a lot of founders have to go outside. I think one of the cons is the culture. We are very sort of parochial and siloed in our ecosystems. And there are a lot of people currently, myself included, who are actively working on sort of breaking down those barriers and those silos to make it so that people are sort of, integrated better. But I think that the reason behind that is cultural. I think that Bostonians and New Englanders are very heads down. And I recently wrote about this of just like, I went to a coffee shop, saw a guy with a VC logo that I knew. My first thought was, don't say anything, leave him be. And I think that that's what everyone says here, which is I don't want to bother anyone and I don't want anyone to bother me. And so I think that kind of just breaking down that cultural norm of saying like, no, we need to be a little bit shoulders back. We need to be pulling in NYC founders and investors and SF founders and investors to be coming to Boston to invest and seed capital, I think is kind of the way to sort of undo some of those difficulties.
Yeah. So in terms of breaking down those barriers, if it's cultural, obviously that's going to take time. What kind of things do you think could be put in place to try and accelerate that process?
Yeah, I think that kind of weaponizing the MIT and Harvard logos, as well as sort of the powerhouse seed stage funds. Like Founder Collective had a 22x return on one of their early funds, which is arguably the best performing VC fund of all time. Now, obviously, it's hard to repeat that, as any GP will tell you, but sort of touting our wins is something that we need to be better at. I think integrating the government with the private capital and sort of the founders who are winning is really, really essential, as well as trying to shift the culture more towards let's have more conferences that actually get GPs from other cities to come here. And, if we have to offer them more dedicated dinners with the best founders here and other, LPs to help them raise, like, I think offering up our resources as carrots to get people to come here for events is part of that.
Yeah, good ideas. And then looking at it in another way, how do you feel the Boston startup community can better support early stage founders in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to build out more spaces, more events. Tying into our successful tech companies is something that I'm really working on. And so, we're kind of in the process of pulling all of the people who are building things and are helping founders together sort of more cohesively. Is a big part of that infrastructure layer that can kind of lend to change that's meaningful.
Yeah. And is there anything on that note that you want to flag and make people aware of that's up and coming? Or
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a bunch of stuff. I'll say Jonathan Chang, Jordan Elster, and Aaron Wagenheim are working on creators and founders, which is bringing creators like content creators into the space and influencers. Nathan Spielberg's doing Build 617, which is kind of an exciting new initiative to help founders who are really dedicated to really building. Sarah Frame with the MTLC, she's got access to so many tech execs who are of even publicly traded companies and sort of big revenue companies out here in Boston. So, I'm trying to play a part in this ecosystem as well. But there's a lot of people out here who are kind of intentionally and deliberately bringing their resources together to make change and make Boston the healthiest place to build a startup.
Yeah, it's good to see that proactive work going on. So shout out to those guys. And then appreciate you've talked to thousands of founders, but if you had to pick out the piece of advice that stuck with you the most, what would you say that nugget was?
Yeah, other than obsess over distribution, I would say a bias towards action. I see so many founders that just get like caught up in analysis paralysis that they just like sit there and toil, and it's like, go do. And it's obviously a spectrum. So, I would say in general, I try to push the needle more towards action. If you're somebody that's doing way too much and becoming overwhelmed, I would push you more towards reflection. But striking that balance of action towards analysis, and analysis is something that's important, but just go do. Stop talking about the nth feature that you're going to build and trying to perfect it. Go forcibly shove it into somebody's hands and get feedback.
Yeah, and then iterate from there, right? Cool. So, and then finally, in terms of the ups and downs that you face as a founder, how do you personally stay sane, motivated, etc., grounded, etc., etc.?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's something I struggle with, actually. There's a lot of stuff that I do, but I think reflecting, I think that time off, I find conversations with others to be really invigorating. And when I do hear ideas that I'm just really wowed by, I'm always just like, I find that to be an energy bump. But I'm also trying to tie better into the capital side of things. I think that, VCs have one of the coolest jobs in the world of just taking other people's money and investing into early stage startups. And so as much as I can sort of bolster that side of things and get further integrated, I'm really intrigued by it. So
yeah, perfect. Well, listen, look, thanks very much, Jonny, for joining Founders Tales today. That was very interesting and insightful to hear your thoughts on all of those areas. So I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. Really appreciate you doing this.